This Shabbat will chant the beautiful Megillah, Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. It begins, Shir HaShirim Asher Lishlomo. This is the Song of Songs, which is Lishlomo. I purposefully have not translated Lishlomo because we're going to discuss today just what that phrase means. It may answer the question, who wrote the book? Or it may reveal that we have to look a little more deeply at that question, who wrote this book, when we figure out what Lishlomo really means. The Song of Songs has been bound to the name Shlomo or Solomon because of this verse. And not only because of this verse, but because there are several other midrashic traditions that say that King Solomon, Shlomo, the son of David, indeed wrote the book of Song of Songs, the scroll, as he wrote the book of Proverbs, as he prepared Megillat Kohelet, the scroll of Ecclesiastes, of our canon as well in the Tanakh. Some classical commentaries, though, and one that is included in the Midrashic collection called Song of Songs Rabbah, takes a look at that first opening verse, the phrasing of Lishlomo, and notes that the Song of Songs, which are Lishlomo, may not reveal that it was of and by King Solomon, the son of David. In fact, it says, the Holy One, blessed be he, in the glory of all of his greatness, uttered this beautiful poem. Rabbi Natan held the Song of Songs, Asher Lishlomo, shall be attributed to the great, glorious King of Peace, the King Lishlomo, who is the master and maker of peace on earth and in the heavens. That interpretation is probably a diuk, making a new interpretation of the word or words Lishlomo, as opposed to how the books of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes include Shlomo's or Solomon's name when they reveal a little about who wrote those particular books of the canon. When it says in Mishlei that Solomon was involved, it says the Proverbs of Shlomo ben David, Solomon, the son of David. And when in Ecclesiastes it mentions Solomon, we see the words, these are the words of Kohelet, son of David. Now, putting aside the confusion that Kohelet is not Shlomo, Kohelet is known as the wise sage, in this case understood to be Solomon, who is the son of David. There was no son of David named Kohelet. The tradition holds that it was indeed Solomon. And so in both cases, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, it says son of David. In our Megillah, in our scroll, Shir HaShirim Asher Lishlomo, it doesn't say Shlomo ben David. It doesn't say Solomon, son of David. It simply says Lishlomo, which is Shlomo's. Now, one piece of midrash in that opening collection of Shir HaShirim Rabbah, Song of Songs Rabbah, does indeed hold that just as David uttered song, so too Solomon uttered his own, and here it attributes the authorship of the Song of Songs to King Solomon. But we don't have to accept as fact that indeed Solomon was the only author. Ibn Ezra, the great Bible commentator, explains that when it says in Psalms, even if you hold that David wrote all of those, when it says a psalm of David, le David, it's possible Ibn Ezra says that that psalm was composed by one of the singers about or for David. Le David, recognizing that the le means to or for the person then named. Radak says the same. The lamed in Le David I have explained, as in for David. It's used elsewhere in Torah, and he points out a place in Genesis where, in fact, the construct comes together. Rashi, who's very authoritative in our tradition, says he recited this prayer in reference to his son Solomon. Could it be that an author composed beautiful poetry, Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, Lishlomo, in honor of Solomon, for Solomon, to King Shlomo? Now we know Rabbi Chia taught that it was in Solomon's old age that the Holy Spirit rested on him, and he uttered 3 books: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs. We do accept as tradition Rabbi Yonatan's explaining that the Song of Songs he wrote in his youth, and Proverbs when he had a little experience, and Ecclesiastes, the great existential reflections on life, in his later age. We accept that as a midrashic tradition. But with our understandings of biblical scholarship and using medieval commentaries that point out Lishlomo may not indicate authorship, but that the Song of Songs was for Solomon, we can take that a little further and look at verses throughout our scroll, throughout the Megillah, and say, might it be better to explain that this book really was for Shlomo and a celebration of King Solomon's Malchut, King Solomon's reign as a king of a unified Israel in its time, in his time. Listen to these verses about Solomon that are mentioned in the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs, which is for Solomon, translating with this new way of understanding. Like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Behold, it is his litter, that of Solomon. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Hamon. My vineyard, which is mine, is before you. O Solomon, may have the 1,000. These are about Solomon and Solomon's grandeur and greatness. And the phrase King Solomon appears twice, one time describing something King Solomon made for himself, and in other times it says, go forth, daughters of Zion. Behold, King Solomon. Never once does it say, I, King Solomon, said, and nor does a first-person verb appear that we can attribute to King Solomon. In light of the above, the Gemara even suggests that Chizkiah and his colleagues wrote Isaiah, Proverbs, the Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes. Now, what they actually mean there, we have to investigate a little further, but it just provides the havamina, the possibility that even in traditional circles, Solomon wasn't the author, but Solomon was whom we celebrated with this beautiful book. In the Song of Songs itself, the land of Israel is depicted as a vast country yet undivided between the Israel and Judah kingdoms. Only in the time of David and Solomon was that true. And Lebanon, mentioned so many times in the book, there was such a beautiful and rich connection, strong connection between Solomon and Hiram, the king of Tyre, which may explain this inclusion within the Song of Songs of both the landscape of Eretz Yisrael and that of Lebanon itself. About King Solomon's time and power and the beauty of the land, it says in the book of Kings that he had domain over all the region on this side of the river from Tipsha to Gaza, over all the kings on this side of the river, and he had peace on all sides round about him. And Judah and Israel dwelt in safety, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. If we're to look at some of the parallel descriptions between the book of Kings, the books of Kings, and Shir HaShirim, we would sense that there's a beauty that's being reflected upon here, and a space and a place for lovers and for citizens to flourish. In fact, this is a nice complement then to the tales of history and the descriptions of the land of Israel that we get in the historical books of the prophets. This makes the Megillah in the writing section of the Tanakh a wonderful, wonderful way to describe love and how we not only have a beautiful relationship between men and women and lovers in that physical sense, but between God and Israel, as the allegorical read goes, and as the land of Israel itself is so beautiful, that we have such a love affair with the land. And we hope and pray for peace and tranquility. Perhaps it was written during a time when there wasn't such beauty to behold, free roaming through the gardens of that beautiful land of milk and honey. But as King Solomon himself said in the book of Kings, now the Lord has given me rest on every side, so that there's neither adversary nor evil hindrance. Perhaps that's the hope. And perhaps beyond that, though, beyond the rest, there is this longing for love, a longing for this kind of loftiest of songs and loftiest of feelings that come along with a life of, yes, responsibility, but freedom to really pursue all and who we love. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, and hope you enjoy your read of Song of Songs, which I commend to you highly for this celebration of Pesach.